Lucas Carter meant to send it to his best friend. "Wear whatever you want tonight, as long as I'm the one taking it off." He hit send. Didn't check the name. 3 minutes later, his phone vibrated. Victoria Hayes, CEO, the woman who had fired 3 managers that morning. The last person anyone in the building dared to test. One message. "What should I wear tonight?" Lucas stared at the screen. Heart stopped. His life, without warning, had turned a corner with no coming back. Lucas Carter was 38 years old, and he had built his life on the principle that a man with responsibilities does not make mistakes he cannot afford. He woke at 5:15 every morning. He packed lunches the night before. He reviewed maintenance logs before most of his colleagues had finished their first cup of coffee. He had been working at Meridian Systems, one of the fastest-growing enterprise technology firms on the East Coast, for 4 years. And in those 4 years, he had never been late, never missed a deadline, and never once given anyone a reason to look at him twice. That was, in many ways, exactly the problem. He was a facilities and systems maintenance engineer, which was a long title for a job that most people in the building couldn't fully explain. He kept the infrastructure running, the servers, the network hardware, the environmental controls, the backup systems. He was the reason the lights stayed on during the outage in March. He was the reason the data center didn't flood when the cooling line cracked in November. Nobody knew that. Nobody had thought to ask. His daughter, Emily, was 8 years old and had his dark eyes and her mother's stubbornness and an opinion about everything from breakfast cereal to the best route to school. She was the reason he had taken a job that paid less than he was worth, in a building 30 minutes from her school, with hours that ended in time for pickup. She was the reason he had quietly dismantled the version of himself that once had bigger plans. He did not regret it. He had made the choice with open eyes, and he carried it the way a man carries something precious, carefully, without complaint, without setting it down. His ex-wife, Dana, had left 3 years ago. She had not left badly, which was almost worse. There was no villain in that story. Just 2 people who had grown in different directions until the space between them was too wide to cross. Emily spent weekends with her mother. Lucas spent those weekends doing the maintenance on his own apartment that he kept putting off during the week, and occasionally texting his best friend Marcus about nothing in particular. Victoria Hayes was 34 years old and had been CEO of Meridian Systems for 2 years. She had taken the company from a mid-tier regional operation to a firm with a national footprint, and she had done it through a combination of strategic precision and a personal style that most people in the building privately described as terrifying. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She communicated displeasure through silence, through the particular angle of her gaze, through a stillness that made the air in any room feel suddenly thinner. On the morning of the day, Lucas sent the wrong message. She had restructured 2 departments, declined 4 meeting requests, and told 3 senior managers with complete composure that their positions had been eliminated, effective immediately. She was not cruel. She was not unkind. She was simply operating on a frequency that most people in that building could not reach. Nobody flirted with Victoria Hayes. Nobody joked with her. Nobody teased her. Nobody tested her. The unspoken rule was so deeply understood that it had never needed to be spoken at all. Lucas Carter had broken that rule at 7:43 on a Wednesday evening. Not because he was brave, not because he had a plan, because he had been tired and careless and 2 contacts off in his phone's message list. The message had started, as most bad decisions do, completely innocently. Lucas was sitting in the break room on the 4th floor, 20 minutes past the end of his shift, eating a sandwich he'd been carrying since noon. His phone was in his hand. Marcus had texted him earlier about a woman he'd been seeing, someone named Rachel, and they'd been going back and forth in the easy, stupid way that men do when they're comfortable with each other. Marcus had said something about a date that night. He'd asked Lucas what he thought Rachel should wear. Lucas had meant to type something ridiculous, something that would make Marcus laugh. He'd been tired. The fluorescent light above him had been flickering for 3 days he'd submitted the work order. Nobody had acted on it, and the flicker had been doing something unpleasant to the back of his eyes all afternoon. His fingers moved fast across the screen. The message took shape, and he hit send. He set the phone down and finished his sandwich. He was folding the wax paper wrapper when the reality arrived. Not slowly, not gradually, it arrived all at once, the way cold water does when you step into it without warning. He looked at the thread. He saw the name at the top. He felt his entire circulatory system make a decision to stop functioning normally. Victoria Hayes. The message was there. Delivered. Read receipts were enabled on the company communication app, which was the app they were both using, which meant the small check mark next to his message had already turned from gray to blue. She had seen it. There was no unsending. There was no technical glitch that would erase it. There was no version of the next 24 hours in which this had not happened. He stared at the screen for 10 seconds. Then he did what any rational person does in a moment of pure professional catastrophe. He began running through scenarios. He could say it was a wrong number. She already knew it was him. The message came from his account. He could pretend his phone had been hacked. He could apologize immediately. He could say nothing and hope, against all available evidence, that she would choose to ignore it. He was still running through scenarios when the phone buzzed against his palm. The message that appeared was 4 words long. It contained 1 question mark, and in those 4 words, Victoria Hayes managed to do something that no crisis, no restructuring, no eliminated position had ever done to Lucas Carter in 4 years. She made him completely, utterly unable to think. Asterisk. What should I wear tonight? Asterisk. Lucas read it, set the phone down, picked it up, read it again. His first thought was that he was being tested, that HR had been alerted, and this was a sting, a documentation exercise, a careful setup designed to catch him in a second infraction before they terminated him cleanly. His second thought was that she was mocking him. His third thought, which arrived quieter than the other 2, was that the message did not read like mockery or like a test. It read like something else, something he could not immediately categorize. He was still trying to categorize it when the second message came. Asterisk. Or are you only brave behind the screen? Asterisk. Lucas put the phone in his pocket. He walked to his car. He drove home. He made dinner for Emily, helped her with her reading assignment, put her to bed, and sat in his kitchen for 40 minutes without turning on the television. The phone was on the table in front of him. He did not touch it, but he did not stop thinking about those 2 messages. And somewhere underneath the fear, underneath the very legitimate concern for his livelihood, was a current of something warmer and more dangerous and considerably harder to ignore. He did not sleep well. By 6 the next morning he was already in the building, which was not unusual. What was unusual was the specific quality of his alertness, the way his attention kept snagging on the elevator doors, on the glass wall of the executive suite, on every set of heels that clicked against the lobby floor. He was not nervous in the way a guilty man is nervous. He was nervous in the way a man is nervous when something large and unpredictable is moving toward him in the dark, and he can hear it, but not yet see it. The message came at 9:47. It was not a text. It was a calendar notification, a meeting request, marked urgent. Source: V. Hayes. Duration: 15 minutes. Location: Executive Conference Room. B. Private. The note field contained 3 words. Asterisk. Come alone, please. Asterisk. Lucas looked at the notification for a long moment. Around him, the open floor of the maintenance and operations department continued its ordinary morning keyboards, phone calls, someone arguing quietly about a vendor invoice. Nobody had any reason to know that his entire professional future was potentially suspended in the space between this moment and whatever was waiting for him in Conference Room B. He closed the notification. He finished what he was doing. At 10 o'clock exactly, he walked to the elevator. The executive floor was quieter than the rest of the building. the way expensive things often are carpeted and climate-controlled and arranged to communicate authority without effort. The glass walls of the conference rooms meant that anyone passing through the corridor could see in. Lucas was acutely aware of this. He was aware of the two women at the reception desk who looked up when he came off the elevator. He was aware of the slight pause in the ambient rhythm of the floor as he walked past. Victoria was already in the room. She was standing at the window, not sitting, which was either a power move or a habit he couldn't tell yet. She was wearing charcoal gray. Her hair was up. She looked exactly as she always looked, composed, precise, unreachable. She waited until the door closed. Then she turned around, and Lucas saw something in her face that he had never seen there before in 4 years of working in the same building. It wasn't anger. It wasn't amusement. Exactly. It was something closer to consideration, the expression of a person looking at something they didn't expect to find interesting and discovering, despite themselves, that they were. "So," she said, "about last night." Lucas held her gaze and said nothing. He had decided on the elevator that whatever she said first, he would not apologize immediately, because an immediate apology carried a specific kind of energy. The energy of a man who knows he was wrong and is hoping to minimize damage, and something in him, some instinct that had nothing to do with self-preservation, had decided that was not the right energy for this room. She waited. He waited. The silence lasted 4 seconds. "You're not going to grovel," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm going to apologize," he said, "for the mistake, not for the message." She looked at him for another moment. And then she did something that Lucas Carter had genuinely never witnessed in 4 years. She almost smiled. What followed was not the conversation he had expected. Victoria sat down. She gestured for him to sit. She poured 2 cups of coffee from the carafe on the side table, one for him, one for herself, and she set his in front of him without ceremony. Then she said something that rearranged, quietly and completely, his understanding of who she was. "I don't have anyone to send a message like that to," she said. "I haven't for a long time." She said it the way someone states a logistical fact. No self-pity, no bid for sympathy, just the flat truth of a life built in a particular direction. She told him what the people who watched her from a distance never thought to wonder. That the coldness was not a wall she had constructed. It was simply what remained after years of being treated as a function rather than a person. Colleagues who wanted decisions from her. Board members who wanted results. A company that had grown so large around her that it had become its own form of cage. "You sent me a message that treated me like a woman," she said. "Do you have any idea how long it's been since anyone did that?" Lucas said nothing. He was listening in the particular way he listened to systems when they were telling him something was wrong, not for the words, but for the signal underneath. "I'm not asking you to make it into something it wasn't," she said. "I know it was a mistake. I'm asking for something smaller. There's a private industry event tomorrow night, a reception for technology leadership firms. I'm expected to attend. I'm expected to bring someone." She looked at him steadily. "I'd like that someone to be you." He asked the obvious question. "Why him?" "Because you're the only person in this building who didn't immediately start apologizing when I walked into the room," she said. "That's rarer than you think." Lucas considered this. He thought about Emily, who was spending the next night with Dana. He thought about the 100 practical reasons this was a bad idea. He thought about the way the conference room felt different from how it had felt when he walked in charged, slightly off-axis, like a room where the furniture has been moved 2 inches to the left, and everything is technically the same and somehow completely different. He said yes. Not because he was brave, not because he had a plan, because the woman sitting across from him was asking him for something honest, and he was, at the core of himself, someone who responded to honesty the way other people respond to music. The event was held in a hotel ballroom in the financial district, the kind of space designed to make everyone inside it feel slightly more important than they are. Crystal, mahogany, soft lighting calibrated to flatter. The room was full of people who had the particular posture of individuals accustomed to being looked at, which meant that when Lucas Carter walked in beside Victoria Hayes, the specific quality of the looks directed at him was immediately legible. He was not wearing the right suit. Not quite. His jacket was good but not custom. His shoes were polished but not Italian. He was not the kind of man this room expected to see beside a woman like Victoria. He was aware of this in the concrete, unbothered way that a man is aware of weather. It was a fact. It was not a judgment, and it required no particular response. Victoria noticed that he noticed. She also noticed that he didn't flinch. They moved through the early part of the evening with the careful choreography of two people executing a mutual arrangement close enough to be convincing, not so close as to suggest anything unguarded. Victoria introduced him to three partners from a venture firm. She watched him work through the small talk with a kind of unhurried directness that was unusual in a room full of people performing versions of themselves. He did not name drop. He did not oversell. He answered questions with the precise number of words they deserved. 2 hours into the evening, standing near the far end of the bar, he said something that made her laugh, actually laugh. Not the polished social version, but the kind that happens when something genuinely surprises a person. But he had seen it, and he filed it away with the careful attention of someone who understands that the real data is always in the anomalies. It was the first genuine thing he had seen from her. It would not be the last. The interruption came 40 minutes before the event was scheduled to close. A man named Gregory Walsh, regional director of Meridian's East Coast Partnership Division, the kind of person who had mistaken professional proximity to power for the actual possession of it, materialized at Lucas's elbow, with a drink in his hand and an expression that had decided, without doing any real research, that Lucas was someone who could be safely diminished. "You're in maintenance, right?" Walsh said. "Not a question. A categorization. Systems engineering," Lucas said. "Right. Right." Walsh made a small gesture that was technically a nod and functionally a dismissal. "The plumbing guys." He looked at Victoria as he said it. Bold choice. Bringing the maintenance crew to Whitmore's reception. Victoria said nothing. Her expression did not change. Lucas registered this, the silence, the stillness, the particular quality of her not responding, and understood that he was being observed. Not tested. Observed. There was a difference. "It's a good event," Lucas said. His voice was the same temperature it always was. The venue's systems, on the other hand, have a pressure imbalance on the third-floor cooling loop that's going to cause a problem before the quarter's out. He looked at Walsh the way he looked at equipment he had already diagnosed. "But that's the kind of thing maintenance crew notices." Walsh's expression shifted. Somewhere between irritation and a feeling he couldn't quite name, he took his drink and found somewhere else to be. Victoria watched him go. Then she looked at Lucas. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. The moment passed, but something in it did not. It was 40 minutes later that the crisis arrived, the kind that reorders everything. The presentation was the centerpiece of the evening, a live demonstration of Meridian's new infrastructure platform, the system that the company had spent 14 months and a reported $50 million developing. The room had gathered. The screen had lit up, and then, with the particular cruelty of high-stakes technology, the system had collapsed. Not a glitch. Not a minor error. A cascading failure, the kind that suggests a fundamental flaw in the underlying architecture. The kind that cannot be patched in real time by anyone who doesn't understand the system from the ground up. 3 of Meridian's senior engineers were at the terminal within 90 seconds. They worked for 4 minutes. The room had gone from polite attention to the specific silence of people watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. Lucas watched from 20 feet away. He could see the screen from where he stood. He could see the error state. He could see, in the structure of the failure, in the precise sequence of what was breaking, and in what order, the shape of the problem. It was not the kind of thing most people would see. It required a particular kind of pattern recognition, the kind built over years of working inside systems rather than around them. He walked to the terminal. One of the engineers looked up. "This is a closed—" "I see it," Lucas said. He was already looking at the code. The synchronization handshake between the load distribution layer and the failover protocol is running a deprecated command set. It's been working in test environments because the test environments don't run under sustained concurrent load. Under real conditions, it creates a feedback loop. He was typing before he finished the sentence. Nobody stopped him. Later, some of them would say it was because of his certainty. There is a specific kind of authority that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply operates. And the room around it adjusts. 90 seconds. That was how long it took. The screen stabilized. The cascade reversed. The platform came back online with every metric in normal range. In the audience, someone started clapping, a single person, then a second, and then the room. Lucas stepped back from the terminal. He was not performing modesty. He simply had no use for the moment after a system was fixed. The problem was solved. That was the whole point. He turned around. Victoria was standing 8 feet away. She had not moved. She was looking at him in a way she had never looked at him before. Not with admiration exactly, it was more fundamental than admiration. It was the look of a person recalibrating. Of someone who had been operating with incomplete data and had just received a correction so significant it changed the shape of everything they thought they understood. Gregory Walsh was somewhere in the back of the room, very quiet. She found him an hour later, in the corridor outside the ballroom. The event was winding down. He had his jacket over one arm. He looked the same as he always looked, steady, unhurried, occupying exactly the space he stood in, and not an inch more. "That was not a maintenance move," she said. "No," he agreed. She had done some research. She had started in the elevator on the way down from the executive floor. 2 days earlier, a name in a search field. A few results, a pattern emerging. Lucas Carter had not always been a maintenance engineer. 12 years ago, he had been a systems architect at a firm called Linden Pratt Technologies. He had designed infrastructure solutions for enterprise clients across 6 states. He had been, by every available account, extraordinarily good at it. And then, abruptly, he had stopped. She had found the reason. Not through official records, through the kind of background detail that only emerges when you look at the gaps rather than the achievements. A daughter, a divorce, a choice made quietly and without announcement, the way the best choices often are. "You left your career," she said. "I changed it," he said. "You were designing systems that ran half the infrastructure in this building. Someone needed to maintain them," he said. He looked at her with the same directness he always used, the directness that had no social performance in it. "And I needed to be home by 4:15. She stood with that for a moment. There are people who sacrifice things visibly, who need the sacrifice to be witnessed. Lucas Carter was not one of them. He had made his choice the way he made everything, methodically, without drama, with a clarity about what mattered more. And he had carried it so quietly for so long that the rest of the world had simply taken it at face value. "There's something else," she said. "The legacy migration protocol that stabilized our server architecture in 2019, the one nobody could trace to an author, the one that's been quietly running under our entire technical infrastructure for 6 years." Lucas said nothing. "It has your signature," she said. "Not literally. But the logic structure, the fail-safe design, it's the same pattern. I had our lead architect look at it this morning. He said whoever wrote it was either a genius or someone with 20 years of hard operational experience compressed into about 4. Or both," Lucas said quietly. There was no boast in it, just an accurate statement of the ledger. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. The corridor was empty except for the two of them. Somewhere behind the ballroom doors, the evening was ending. "You've been holding this building up for 6 years," she said. "And nobody knew." "I knew," he said. 3 days later, Victoria called a company-wide meeting. Not a department meeting, not a leadership session, a full company assembly in the main atrium, every floor, every division, every person in the building. It was the kind of thing she did maybe twice a year, and it always signaled something consequential. The room filled with the specific nervous energy of a large group of people who don't yet know whether what's coming is good news or bad. She stood at the front without notes. She spoke clearly and without theatrical preamble. She recounted, in precise terms, the events at the Whitmore reception, the system failure, the response, the outcome. She named the engineer responsible for the save. She did not say maintenance engineer. She said lead systems architect, formerly of Linden Pratt Technologies, currently the most technically capable person in this building, a fact we collectively failed to recognize for 4 years. Lucas was standing near the back of the atrium. He had not known this was coming. His expression was the same as it always was, composed, unreadable to anyone who didn't know where to look. But his jaw had tightened slightly, and his eyes were doing something that had nothing to do with professional composure, and everything to do with a man who has carried a weight alone for a long time, and has just felt someone else's hand reach out and take part of it. She turned to the second part. Gregory Walsh was standing 3 rows from the front. He had been standing there since the beginning of the meeting with the expression of a man who has begun to understand that the weather is turning. Victoria addressed him by name and by title and by the specific incident in the corridor at the Whitmore reception, and she did it with the same flat, unadorned accuracy she used for everything. She said that the conduct was inconsistent with the values of the company. She said that the position of regional director, East Coast Partnerships, was being eliminated, effective immediately, and that Mr. Walsh's severance package had already been prepared. Walsh left without a word. The room was absolutely silent. Victoria waited for 2 counts, then looked back out at the assembly. "This company functions because of people who do the work," she said, "not the people who manage proximity to it." She paused. "Lucas Carter," she said, "I'd like to offer you the position of Chief Infrastructure Architect. Your scope would include systems design, operational oversight, and direct advisory access to leadership. The compensation package will be on your desk this afternoon." The room turned to find him. Lucas let the attention settle. He took a breath. "I appreciate it," he said. "I need to decline." The silence took on a different texture. "My daughter's school schedule runs until 3:45, he said. "My current position allows me to be in the pickup line by 4. I've built my life around that window. I'm not in a position to trade it, regardless of what's on the other side." He said it without apology and without regret, the same way he'd made the original choice 12 years ago with both eyes open. A number of people in that atrium would later say it was the most impressive thing they witnessed that year. Not the system save, not the public recognition, the refusal, the calm, complete certainty of a man who has already done the work of deciding what matters. Victoria held his gaze from across the atrium. Her expression was impossible to read, except to someone who was paying very close attention. Lucas was paying very close attention. She looked at him for a full 3 seconds, and then she said something that nobody in the room was prepared for, least of all Lucas Carter. "Then let me build a place where you don't have to choose. Life does not change in a single day. Anyone who has lived past 35 knows this. Change arrives incrementally, in the margins, in the small adjustments that only become visible in retrospect." Lucas went home that evening and made dinner. Emily sat at the kitchen table and told him about a project she was doing on weather systems, which she had decided was the most interesting topic in human history, and Lucas listened with the full quality of attention he gave to everything, and the evening was ordinary and good. He did not think about Victoria Hayes, or he told himself he didn't. The way a person tells themselves they are not thinking about a song that has been playing in their head all day. 2 weeks passed. The formal restructuring of his position was underway, a new title, adjusted hours, a scope that allowed him to design at the level he was actually capable of while remaining physically unreachable before 3 o'clock. It was, as these things go, a reasonable miracle. The kind of outcome that requires someone with real authority to decide, against organizational habit, to arrange things differently. He did not call her. She did not call him. The distance between them had a shape he couldn't quite name, not cold, not warm, but present in the way that things are present when both parties are being careful about them. And then, on a Tuesday evening in late October, when Emily was at her mother's and the apartment was quiet in the particular way that quiet is when you are accustomed to it being full, his phone lit up on the kitchen counter. One message. Asterisk, I'm choosing my outfit again. Could use a second opinion. Asterisk. Lucas read it. He read it again. He set the phone down. He stood at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at the street below, where the fall evening was doing what fall evenings do, drawing the light down early, turning the air brisk and specific, making the world feel smaller and somehow more precise. He was smiling, not broadly, just at the corners, the kind of smile that happens before you've decided to let it. He was still standing there when he heard the knock at the front door. He wasn't expecting anyone. He checked his watch, 7:42. He walked to the door and opened it. Victoria Hayes was standing in the hallway. She was not wearing her executive armor. She was not in charcoal, gray, or structured black. She was in a dark blue coat, collar turned up against the October cold, hair down for only the second time he had ever seen. She was not the CEO. She was not the figure at the front of the atrium. She was not the woman behind the glass wall on the executive floor. She was just a person standing in a hallway, having made a decision and waiting to see what came next. You didn't answer my text, she said. I was thinking, he said. About what? He leaned against the doorframe. He looked at her, really looked, the way he looked at systems when he was reading what they were actually telling him rather than what he expected them to say. About the fact that the last time I opened a door without thinking about it first, he said slowly, it was because I sent a message I hadn't meant to send, and it turned out to be the best mistake I've ever made. Victoria tilted her head very slightly. The faintest light came into her expression, not a smile, not quite, but the thing that lives just before one. So, she said. Lucas stepped back from the door. He held it open wider. Come in, he said. She did. The door closed behind her. The street outside continued its ordinary evening business, unaware that something had just changed in an apartment on the 3rd floor quietly, without announcement, the way the best things do. There would be complications. There would be conversations they hadn't had yet, and questions they hadn't answered, and a child who would eventually need to be introduced and would have opinions about all of it. There would be the shape of 2 lives rearranged to make room for each other gradually, imperfectly, with the particular patience of people who have already lived long enough